Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books, where each week we interview an author of a newly published work of nonfiction that we believe is worth your time. The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the University of Texas Brownsville or this station. And now, here is your host, Dr. Bill Strong.
Today we have Gretchen Reynolds from the New York Times. She writes a very popular phys ed column for the New York Times, and it posts online as part of a kind of wellness blog that also appears in the print edition of the Science Times. She has a runaway bestseller of a book called The First 20 Minutes, and it deals with, the first 20 minutes of workout. That's where the crucial fitness is. That's where you get the greatest benefits in the first 20 minutes, and this has been a big bestseller. Now she's written a companion piece, an ebook that goes with that, and it's called The First 20 Minutes Personal Trainer. And this is available for $3.99 on Amazon and other places that you can download digital books. So skip your lunch today, download this book, and lengthen your life. Hi, Gretchen.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
Well, tell me about your, you've been writing for the New York Times for some time in a phys ed column, it's called. And this has been a very popular column, and I'm sure that it dovetails with your book nicely. Were you surprised by the great success of this book?
I should say, if I'm not being self-aggrandizing, of course I was surprised. But actually, no, because I tried to write a book that selfishly was of great interest to me, but really is meant to be of use for anyone who happens to own a body. It's not. It's not a book for athletes, for only, or certainly not only for competitive athletes. It really is for people like me who are no longer. I'm not in my 20s. I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to keep my brain. I want to be able to think. I want to be able to, at some point, lift grandchildren. I just want to be healthy and as fit as I need to be. And this is the information that's coming out of exercise science labs about how to do that.
Now, I love the way this book is structured, where you just kind of take on the myths about exercise and correct those myths. So I don't want to go over all of them. We don't have time to do that, but I think it's beautifully described in terms of the most current science and what we need to know to get moving and to move smartly. What do you suppose are the number one things that the average couch potato has wrong in their mind?
I would say the biggest one is that a lot of people think if you don't go out and run for an hour, you're not getting any benefits, that it's meaningless. And in fact, the science is really persuasive that even standing up has health benefits. And certainly walking for 10 minutes, walking for 15 minutes, especially walking for about 20 minutes, can add years to your life in a very short period of time. It doesn't require a huge investment of time or effort. It just involves not sitting all day long. And that's it. Don't even call it exercise. Gardening, walking to the store, anything can make a profound difference in your health and fitness, and you don't have to call it exercise at all.
Well, I remember about, I guess it was 5 years ago, I came across this study from the Cooper Institute that you mentioned in your book, the Cooper Institute in Dallas, that advocated the 10,000 step program. If you just took 10,000 steps a day, that you would be healthy.
Yes, and in fact, the Cooper Institute, by the way, has done some phenomenal work with people. And 10,000 steps actually, believe it or not, is close to 5 miles.
Yes.
It's also what we should be doing. And it's really interesting when they ask people, how much are you moving? Almost everyone says, I'm moving a lot more than that. And then when they put what are called accelerometers, which are little gadgets that actually measure how much you're moving, and have those same people wear them for a few days, they're not walking, they're not moving nearly that much. So we do need, for good health, to just stand up, park the car a little further away when you go to the store.
Yes.
Start incorporating walking up the stairs. I mean, some of these things sound so simple, they don't really sound like, health benefits. But in fact, the difference between someone who walks, say, 2,000 steps a day and someone who walks 10,000 steps a day is about 4 to 5 years of life.
Wow.
And that's really profound. That's, 5 extra years that you have with your family, with your loved ones, to do the things you want to do with your life. And all it requires is just moving a little bit more.
Well, my mom lived to be 101 and a half. And she...
That's great.
Yes, it is. But she is testimony to what you're talking about, because she never stopped moving. She was always, she mowed her lawn until she was 85. She was always walking, and not in a formal sense. She didn't say, I'm going to go walk a mile, but she was moving in the house all the time, walking, doing housework, wouldn't stop. The Energizer Bunny,
What's really interesting is when scientists have studied movement patterns, that they have found that, say, the Old Order Amish, which are really a pretty good representative today of how our parents and grandparents moved.
Yes.
They don't exercise. They never go for runs.
But
the
go
men
to the gym.
walk about 10 miles a day, just every single day. The women are either walking or moving around in the house at least 7 miles a day. Most of us have stopped doing movement just over the course of our day. We don't stand up and cook. We don't walk around the house and garden. We don't do all the things that used to just be part of normal life. And that, even people who exercise, don't do those things. There's this whole modern phenomenon called the active couch potato, which used to be me, by the way.
Right, is that right?
Those are people who, you go and you run, or you go to the gym and you work out for half an hour. You go home, you go to the office, you sit the entire rest of the day. Those people, and as I said, I was one of them, are actually using less energy than our parents used to, than our grandparents used to over the course of a day. It's just really important to start incorporating basic movement throughout the entire day. Stand up every 20 minutes. That's actually really important for good health.
I have something that I notice I find amusing. I go to a gym to work out, and I find it interesting that at the gym, in the gym parking lot, people will drive around and around to park as close to the door as they can, even though they're going to go in and walk 2 miles on the treadmill. It's kind of a funny phenomenon that they won't bother to just go ahead and park at the end of the parking lot, since they're going to be walking a lot anyway.
And if they would leave their car at home and walk to the gym, they would get 10 times as much benefit.
Well, that's true, but we're in Texas. It'd take 10 miles to get to the gym, but I guess that would do it, wouldn't it?
Well, and even, as you said, even parking, half a block away so that you walk those extra, half a mile can really add up over the course of a week in terms of how many calories you burn, how much energy you're using. And what's really great about that kind of fairly lightweight exercise or activity is it does not seem to promote it does not prompt the body to release appetite hormones. So you can do that kind of light activity and you do not get as hungry as if you're doing more formal exercise. A lot of people go out and exercise, and then they're very hungry, and they eat so that they've replaced more calories than they just burned.
Yes, that's me.
That's very, very common.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention is when I read the Cooper Institute study, I got a pedometer, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this 10,000 step thing. And I, did it for, I'd say, about 2 months, because I found it hard to actually do 10,000 steps. I would try to incorporate it in my day, and that's when I discovered just what you mentioned, that if I would park half a mile from my office and walk in and walk out, that was an easy mile, didn't think about it. But always toward the end of the day, I still needed 1.5 miles to go. So I'd have to go out and knock off that extra 1,000 steps or whatever. And so it took some concentration. But what I liked about your book is it says you don't have to do that necessarily if you do intensive workouts, right?
Yes, that's also another thing that science has proven fairly recently is that, especially for anyone who is time constrained, and again, I put myself in this group, you can actually get all the benefits of a very long, slow sort of workout in just a few minutes if you do it hard. Mm-hmm. And what that means in practical terms, it is called high-intensity intervals. And the scientists have shown that if you, say, run, walk, you can do it walking also, ride a stationary bicycle, do anything where you get your heart rate up almost as high as you can stand. I mean, it really should be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Do that for 1 minute. Go easy for 1 minute. Do that for a grand total of 10 times. You will get the same physiological health and fitness benefits as a 90-minute run.
Wow.
So that's pretty profound.
Yes, that is. So you do a 20-minute workout and you do it intensive for 1 minute and then kind of let off for a minute and then back up for a minute?
Exactly. And if you don't trust yourself to make yourself work hard, mm-hmm. it does help to wear a heart rate monitor and to know what check the posters at your local gym to find out what your target heart rate is, your maximum heart rate. That every gym has posters showing heart rate zones.
Yes.
When you do the interval, you want your heart rate to be at least 90% of your maximum. That means on a scale of 1 to 10 of unpleasantness, mm-hmm. it should be at least a 9. But that's based on your feeling of what a 9 is. So if you are overweight and out of shape, that's going to be very different than a runner's. So just do it and be honest with yourself. And it's actually, if you are honest with yourself, it can be a very good indication of 90% of maximum heart rate.
I see that you have a rather impressive history in terms of writing. You've written for the New York Times, Oprah Magazine, Men's Journal, Outside, Parade, Popular Science, etc. What is your background that pulled you into this? Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not a science major at all. I'm an English literature major.
I knew it.
Which I think actually is
it's helpful
because I honestly have to ask scientists very dumb questions, mm-hmm. and that helps me to pass along the information. But I also, when I was younger, I was a competitive athlete. I ran a couple of marathons and used to race mountain bikes. But one of the nice things about studying the latest in exercise science is learning that the absolute sweet zone or sweet spot for exercise in terms of getting the most health benefits, living the longest life, is to work out 3 or 4 times a week for about half an hour of running. And that's what I do now. Mm-hmm. I no longer feel that I need to train for a marathon. I did that. I walked backwards downstairs for days afterwards.
Oh,
I don't plan to do it again.
I was reading the book by Jurek, who is the
mm-hmm.
He's the ultramarathoner.
Right.
And when I read about running 100-mile marathons in 100-degree heat, I just am amazed that the body can tolerate that.
The body can tolerate it, but the body doesn't need to tolerate it. That's the big lesson that's coming out of physiology labs these days, I think, is that, yes, if you want to do that kind of hard, long effort, the human body is capable of doing that. Mm-hmm. But if you want to live a long, healthy, productive life, mm-hmm. you do not need to do nearly that much. You just need to get up off the couch. as you mentioned, the name of the book is The First 20 Minutes.
Right.
And there's really good evidence that most of the health benefits of exercise, and that means reducing your risk of heart disease, diabetes, dementia, obesity, most of those benefits come in the first 20 minutes of getting up off the couch and doing anything, even standing up, walking around in your living room, doing anything will almost immediately start improving the health of your body. And that's really remarkable and does not require that you run for 90 minutes.
Are sit-ups bad for you?
Anything. Go ahead.
I said, are sit-ups bad for you?
Yes, actually.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Me too, because I hate them. Sit-ups, as most of us were formally taught to do sit-ups, in fact, can be really dangerous for the back. And the sit-ups, especially if you go all the way up to your knees, which again is how most of us were taught, lay on the ground,
yes.
Pull yourself all the way up to the knees, can actually cause lower back problems. So don't do sit-ups. You can do crunches, but if you don't know how to do a crunch correctly, crunches, you just barely lift your head and shoulders up off the ground. Get on YouTube, which is a phenomenal resource for how to do exercises correctly,
yes.
and look up a good reputable source showing you how to do crunches.
And if you're trying to get one of the points that you make is if you're trying to get the six-pack that's so popular, that you're more likely to get it from your diet than you are from doing the crunches.
Yes, a six-pack ab looks nice but has no other purpose in terms of making you healthier. And really the only way that you can get a six-pack is to starve yourself so that those muscles show. It has no functional meaning. If you want a good, healthy core, which is what I think people should want so that you don't get hurt, so that your lower back is healthy, the evidence shows you should do a certain number of crunches, you should do a few exercises specifically for some lower back muscles, and you should do what are called side planks, where you lay on the ground sideways and lift your midsection up off the ground. That works the side of your back.
I hate those.
They're not pleasant. They are, unfortunately, fairly important.
Yes. Well, there is something to be said for the no pain, no gain thing. You got to suffer a little bit.
Just a little bit, though. It's not that bad, and it's still. I hate sit-ups a lot more, and those you shouldn't do.
Well, of course, we've heard a great deal about diet being horrible in America. I mean, you can look at photographs of old, like high school annuals, and you can see the people were thin, 50 years ago. Almost any picture you see of soldiers or anybody 40 years ago as a group, you just see immediately, wow, people were thinner then. So what is your advice about diet?
Eat less. Unfortunately, when it comes to losing weight, the best science shows the same thing that common sense tells us, which is you have to take in fewer calories than you're burning. And one thing, and as a proponent of exercise, I'm sorry to have to say this, but the science does show that exercise by itself, if you don't control and change your diet, rarely helps people lose weight. And that is because most people, if they haven't been exercising and they start and they don't control their diet, their appetite increases and they usually eat more. And if you walk for 30 minutes and then have a cupcake, you've just taken in more calories than you burned. So you do have to track the calories that you're taking in. The great news, though, is that exercise seems to be the one thing that pretty much universally helps people keep weight off once they've lost it. So start exercising, control your calories, take off the weight you want to. You will also almost immediately start seeing that your muscles are more defined. You feel better. You will look better if you are exercising while you diet. And then once you reach the weight that you want to be at, any kind of exercise, walking, almost anything, will help you enormously to keep that weight off.
Something that you discuss in the book that's a little, it's in a different category kind of, is this notion of the myth of keep your eye on the ball. And I found that quite fascinating. It isn't dealing with the aerobic fitness or diet or anything. It's just this something we've been told all our lives when we play golf or baseball is keep your eye on the ball. And you say that the best athletes aren't really doing that.
Exactly. The myth is not that you shouldn't keep your eye on the ball. The myth is that we are doing it. Mm-hmm. When they've brought some really good athletes into the lab and had them wear these elaborate little machines that actually tracked their eyeballs, mm-hmm. they were not keeping their eye on the ball. Mm-hmm. So you actually do have to think about keeping your eye on the ball, and also the best science shows, look first exactly where you want the ball to go, then look at the ball, then strike it or throw it or whatever it is that you need to do. And that appears to be very effective. But people would be amazed if they themselves went into these labs and had their gaze tracked at how seldom people actually keep their eye on the ball. Mm-hmm. So the myth is that we're doing this.
So if you're playing golf, for instance, the idea would be that somewhat in line with what the psychologists say, you need to envision where you want it to go, but also to look where you want to go, and then look to the ball, and you kind of create an internal map that your mind and body follow. Yes,
exactly. That's exactly it. And there's this theory called quiet eye training, and anyone who's interested in this, if you get on the internet, you can find some really good information about just how to do this yourself. But you just described it very accurately, which is look where you want the ball to go, then look at the ball. And there's specific information about, if you're golfing, the exact place to look at the ball. But the fundamentals are, your brain will be very good at sending the ball where you want it to go if you look briefly, then look at the ball, and then hit. And it seems so obvious, mm-hmm. and in fact, very few of us do it.
Good. I remember years ago I was talking to a neurologist, Dr. Danny Burns, and he told me that in the research on baseball players, the pro hitters that were very, very good, that they didn't really follow the ball into the home plate, so to speak, or over the plate. When the ball left the hand of the pitcher, that they predicted where it would be. They saccaded, it was called, and they were very good at predicting where, based upon where they saw it leave the hand, it would end up.
And in fact, they've done some fascinating studies of brain activity mm-hmm. in really elite athletes in various ball sports, and they found that the parts of the brain light up in these athletes that would suggest that they are predicting exactly where the ball was going.
Oh.
And those areas do not light up in the rest of us who are not as good.
Oh, there's the problem.
And whether we can train ourselves or whether some of that is innate, I mean, some of that may be the essence of talent.
Yeah, maybe. Do they use that in scouting reports now? Do they put them, on?
I honestly don't know, but I would think they should, because yes. They did some really fascinating work with elite badminton players in Japan mm-hmm. that showed just really striking differences between the ones who were Olympic level and the ones who were just, recreational people like me.
and they could pattern it neurologically. They could see the patterns
Yes,
change.
Exactly. They could see where the parts of the brain lit up when people were either really good at this activity or just competent. And there was an enormous difference. And the extent to which that's training and the extent to which it's inborn isn't clear yet. But the differences were so strong that it suggests some of it you're probably born with.
Yes, and I think for athletes particularly, I think nature plays a huge role in that. I mean, you see a lot of great athletes whose kids are great athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be something, going on genetically.
Yes, there certainly is, although not to depress anyone, that doesn't mean that anyone can't become very good at almost any activity. It's the difference between being very good and being great that may not be trainable.
I think you're right. Yes, I think you're right. I think I'm thinking back to Glen Cunningham, who was the great miler, who was he never quite broke the 4-minute mile, but he came very close. But you remember his story that he was burned badly when he was a kid. He was in a fire and his legs were burned badly, and the doctors told him you'll never walk. And then he went on to become one of the greatest milers in the world. The one thing that we can't.
That it was inevitable.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That nurture and training and will plays such a huge role that can't adequately be measured. Like this guy Jurek, he wasn't a great runner until he pushed himself and
yes,
found
and
an iron will within him.
There's a push in one area of elite sports science to start identifying genes that might tell us, whether a young child is destined to be, a great pitcher or a great runner or something. And I think the best experts in that area would say we will never be able to really identify a great athlete young, because someone can have all of the genes that would suggest they have, great lungs and great legs and should be a great runner. But if they don't have the motivation, they don't have all sorts of other issues, they won't. And someone else will not have the same gene profile and will, in fact, have the willpower, have the good luck that will make them a champion. So I don't think it will ever be, it will never be possible to say this is your destiny, because we make it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time with people who have great potential, great ability, and they don't have any desire to do anything with it. They don't care.
And the reverse.
And the reverse. People with no ability who struggle and make, like a genius level achievement based upon what they started with. So I'm still waiting for that to happen to me.
Me too. Let me know if you find out how to do it.
Well, one thing, we only have about 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask you about your day. What is your average day like physically?
Well, I will say one thing that has really changed in my day as a result of my reporting is I stand up a lot more. I'm standing up right now. Because there's very good evidence that uninterrupted sitting for more than 30 minutes at a time, is really unhealthy. And just standing up can help you lose weight and reduce disease risk. So my laptop sits on a whole bunch of books now. I stand up when I'm on the phone. I try and stand up every 20 to 30 minutes. And I jog with my dogs once a day.
Yeah, I heard them barking back there. They're ready to go.
I guess. I apologize. But
No, it's
dogs
no problem.
are a great motivator for anyone who thinks they don't want to exercise. Get dogs, because they look so sad if you don't take them out.
That is true.
We'll probably go out on the trails right after this.
Well, it's so fascinating you bring that up about standing, because I was telling a friend yesterday that I'm designing. I'm going to move to a new office, and I said, I think I'm going to get rid of my desk, and I'm going to put in a tall table where I can just stand up most of the time and put my computer on that table.
That it changes how well you function through the day. I feel much more alert in the afternoon now than when I was sitting more.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview. I think within 30 minutes you've given a lot of people to do with their first 20 minutes. And so they can certainly get out and change their lives dramatically if they have the will to do so. I recommend this little ebook, The First 20 Minutes Trainer. You can get it. It's on Amazon, right, and other such sources right now?
Yes, it is. It's anywhere that you can get electronic books, it's available.
So like I said earlier, it's $4. So, skip lunch, buy 2 copies, one for you, one for your wife, your spouse, your significant other, and get out and get moving. Thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate your joining us today. This has been wonderful.
It was my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
You're welcome.
If you missed part of this or any other show, or you just want to share a good book with a friend, like us on Facebook at Good Books Radio Show.